It's very, very dangerous for people to follow this prosperity theology. Number one, it creates a very significant disappointment
Yeah.
in God in the lives of so many people.
Let's get into the prosperity gospel. It's sometimes referred to that way. Sometimes it's referred to as the word of faith movement. Just a little background on myself. I didn't grow up in the prosperity gospel, but I was exposed to it. I think ideas just kind of in the culture, in the Christian culture. And then I really sort of was faced with it when I was a young adult, when I was I'd moved from California to New York, and I'd gone to some different meetings that, it's not like they put up a sign and say, hey, we're the prosperity gospel. We're going to, teach you this other thing over here. So you just go to whatever the big meeting is that everybody was going to. And I just remember being so struck by how different the biblical interpretations were, because I had studied the Bible my whole life, and all of these verses that were so precious to me were all of the sudden being applied to money. And I'm going back going, it never even occurred to me to make that specific Bible verse about money. And of course, prosperity gospel isn't just about money, but give us a little bit of a definition of what is the prosperity gospel and how does it differ from the true gospel?
Yeah, so this is a loaded question, but the prosperity gospel is the idea that within the sacrifice of Christ and within the atonement of Christ, there are inherent promises that we have the right to claim as believers. So we have the right as believers to claim divine healing.
Yeah.
And we also have the right to claim prosperity. And so there's a ton of scriptures that they will point to, mostly out of context. And I'll give people one where they'll say, one of their famous ones is, by his stripes we are healed, Isaiah chapter 53. And so they'll look at that and they'll say, okay, well, by the stripes that Jesus took on his back, we're healed. And they don't even look at the fact that throughout the entire book of Isaiah, the word healing is referring to a spiritual healing. When God is talking about, for I have healed Israel, right? He's not talking about physical sin. He's not talking about physical. He's talking about, I've healed their sinfulness, their waywardness, their backsliding. And so we can't just look at that word healing throughout the whole book of Isaiah and notice that it's talking to a spiritual healing, and then look in this one verse and say, oh, that must mean that I'm going to be healed of every single disease that we have. So that is an overview of the prosperity theology. But some of the problems with it that make it basically make it a false gospel is that a few things, and it's very, very dangerous for people to follow this prosperity theology. Number one, it creates a very significant disappointment in God in the lives of so many people. When you have these teachers that are saying, hey, if you just sow a seed into my ministry, or if you just confess this, or hey, God is going to heal you of that. And then they believe that because they don't know any better. They're younger Christians. They don't know any better. And then someone doesn't get healed. Their father doesn't get healed. Their mother still dies of cancer. And now they're not blaming the church. They're blaming God because they feel like God has let them down. And as a result, God is not loving. God is not good. God is not trustworthy. God does not keep his word. And therefore, I don't want to follow God anymore. So it creates a very significant disappointment in God. But then the bigger part of it is that it really trades places with God, right? In other words, the true gospel is such that God has done so much for us that in response to what God has done for us, we are to do for him. And we do what God tells us to do. With the prosperity theology, it almost sounds like they're reversing it, where we are able to control the hand of God by pulling certain little strings and confessing things. And so now we're putting ourselves in the place of God, where we can create things with our creative, or we can claim it, we can decree it, we can declare it, we can blab it and grab it and whatever. And so now we are controlling God, and we are putting ourselves in the position of God, and we're putting God in the position of a servant where he merely exists to serve us. and to fulfill the things that we create with our mouths. So it's a very, very huge problem.